Hi, you're on the Reddit Confessions channel. The casserole was burning. The smoke alarm was screaming. She didn't even flinch. I can leave, she said, slicing into a pear like she was hosting a cooking show. I was holding a wet towel, flapping it under the alarm like a sad, panicked pigeon. The kitchen smelled like scorched onions and betrayal. She was calm, radiant, even wearing that silk robe she only puts on when she's in a particularly smug mood. Like when her ex from college sends her a message at midnight or she gets compliments from strangers in the parking lot. I didn't speak right away. My mind stuttered over her words like a car running on empty. She expected panic, a stammer, maybe even a desperate, "Please no, don't go." Instead, I pointed toward the front door and said, "Great, exit's right there." She blinked once, slow, and tilted her head like she was trying to decide if I was serious or broken. Then she laughed, not loudly, not even cruelly, just amused, as if I was an adorable little pet that had learned a new trick. "I mean it," I added softer this time. "If that's how you feel, don't let the door get sentimental." She walked out of the room, not out the door, not yet, and said over her shoulder, "You always ruin dinner." And that should have been it. Just another insult to add to the pile. But something shifted in the air after that. A current, a shift in gravity. It wasn't just a bad evening, it was the moment, the one I'd replay later, trying to pinpoint exactly when I stopped being her person and became her placeholder. The casserole turned black, the alarm finally died, but I couldn't stop shaking. Later that night, while she was in the shower humming like nothing had happened, I opened her laptop. I wasn't looking for anything, but I found everything. The shower was still running. That was the only reason I had time. I didn't plan to snoop. I genuinely didn't. But when I picked up her laptop from the couch, it was already open. The screen was glowing, still logged in, not even asleep, just sitting there like it wanted me to see. There were 14 tabs open. 4 of them were work-related: blueprints, interior renderings, a supplier invoice, all normal. But then the 5th one hit me in the chest. Weekend getaways for 2, no ID required. I thought it was a mistake, maybe a pop-up, a joke. But the next tab said, luxury cabin rentals, couple discounts. And the one after that, how to break the news to your husband without feeling guilty. I didn't breathe. My hand hovered over the trackpad. I wasn't ready. I clicked anyway. The article wasn't subtle. It talked about cleansing detachment and reclaiming identity and prioritizing passion. It wasn't written for someone trying to fix a marriage. It was a breakup script disguised as empowerment. My heart started hammering, not because I was afraid she was leaving, but because I realized she already had. The 10th tab was an email draft, not to me, to someone named Wes Lee. So I told him. He didn't even flinch. Can you believe that? It's like he's made of soggy bread. I almost feel bad. Almost. Anyway, weekend still on? I need a break from the smell of beige walls and self-pity. That line, soggy bread. I closed the laptop slowly, like it was a coffin lid. The shower was still going. She was in there, probably humming, probably thinking about him. I stood up, quiet, careful. My legs were shaking like I just stepped off a roller coaster. But I made it to the bedroom. I opened the closet, grabbed the old duffel bag she always said was too ugly to travel with. I figured that made it perfect. I didn't know what I was doing. I just knew I couldn't sit there pretending to be the bland beige wallpaper she wanted to peel off her life. But then I saw it. Something sticking out from the inside pocket of her gym bag. A key not from our house. A plastic hotel-style keycard with a logo I recognized. It was the same resort we once saved up for on our anniversary. The one I thought meant something. Now she was going there again with him. My ears started ringing. Not rage, not even grief, just pressure. Like the entire room was closing in. That's when I heard the water shut off. I zipped the duffel bag, walked back to the couch, sat down, opened the laptop again, and left all 14 tabs exactly where she left them, and added one more. How to legally separate when only one person was pretending to be married. She came out in her towel, saw me sitting there. "Thought you'd be in bed," she said. I didn't answer. I just smiled the exact same way she did when she delivered her line in the garage. "Great," I said. "Exit's still right there." Her face twitched. For once, she didn't know what to say, but I had so much more to say. I didn't confront her that night. I wanted to. I had the words swirling in my mouth, clawed to get out. But I also knew if I spoke too soon, it would all be twisted. She'd cry, she'd blame stress, she'd flip the spotlight until I was the one on trial for spying. So I waited, but I didn't wait quietly. The next day, while she was out supposedly meeting a client, I drove an hour to see someone I hadn't spoken to in nearly a year. Her brother, Caleb. She didn't know we still kept in touch. After his divorce, she said he was too negative and toxic to be around. Translation, he saw through her. Caleb opened the door in gym shorts and a band tee, looked me up and down and said, "You look like you just dug your own grave and climbed inside." I said, "She's cheating." He didn't ask who or how, he just nodded like he'd known all along and was waiting for me to catch up. We sat on his balcony. I showed him screenshots, the email, the resort key, her words. He winced. "Wesley R.," he muttered. "She used to bring him around before you guys got serious. Said they were just friends." I laughed bitterly and hollow. Guess she circled back. Then Caleb told me something that made the floor tilt under my feet. "She's been planning this for a while," he said. "You ever wonder why she stopped talking about kids 2 years ago? Or why she suddenly took that me-time trip to Colorado last spring solo?" I did wonder, but she was so convincing. She painted every red flag with pastel explanations. Now it all looked neon. Caleb leaned forward. "Look, I know you. You want to fix this? Patch it. Say maybe it's your fault. Don't. She's not confused, Lel. She's done. She just hasn't told you cleanly yet." That hurt more than anything, not because he was wrong, but because he was right. I left his place with a knot in my throat and a bag of leftover Chinese food I didn't ask for. I didn't need it. I just sat in my car for 40 minutes outside my own house, watching the porch light flicker, thinking about how many fake smiles had happened behind that door. And then something wild happened. She called me just before I went in. I stared at the screen as it buzzed in my hand. I finally answered. She didn't say hello. Just, "Hey, don't forget to book that dental cleaning." "Okay, that's it." That's all she said. Like nothing was cracked, like the bomb hadn't gone off. I said, "Sure," and hung up. But something inside me whispered, "Book something else too." And so I did. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I couldn't, because I wouldn't. If I closed my eyes, I'd see her in that silk robe, casually slicing fruit while cutting our marriage in half. So I stayed awake in the living room with the TV on mute and a browser full of tabs of my own. But mine weren't about weekend getaways. Mine were about lawyers and therapists and self-storage. By sunrise, I had booked 3 things. A consultation with a divorce attorney named Dana Walters, a session with a therapist I hadn't seen since my dad passed, and maybe the most emotionally difficult one, a 10x10 storage unit with climate control and 24-hour access. I stared at that last confirmation email longer than I should have. There was something final about it, like I'd quietly admitted my home was no longer mine, just a space I rented with someone who had already emotionally sublet her half to another man. When Breda woke up, she acted like everything was fine. She poured coffee. She asked me if I wanted eggs. She wore a sweatshirt from our trip to Big Bear. It almost worked. Almost. I watched her pour almond milk into her mug and hum along to a song on her phone, and I had to bite my tongue to stop from screaming. "How can you act like this isn't crumbling?" Instead, I just said, "I might work late." She didn't ask why. She just nodded and said, "Cool, I have yoga anyway." Yoga, that was her new alibi. Not even creative. And if Wesley R. was limber enough, I bet she wasn't even lying. At exactly 2:15 p.m., I was sitting across from Dana Walters, who had the kind of eyes that looked like they'd seen every ugly truth twice and were still unamused. I told her everything. Not just the emails and the keycard, but the years of slow erosion. How Britt had stopped asking about my day, stopped kissing me goodnight. How she rolled her eyes when I talked too long and flinched when I touched her arm in public. Dana nodded, scribbled a few things and said, "Emotional abandonment is real. Courts don't ignore that anymore." That sentence felt like a life raft. But the shock came next, when Dana ran a background check on the resort's recent bookings under Wesley's name, something she said she could legally request through their legal directory tools. His name didn't appear once, but hers did twice under two different male guests. I thought the floor was going to swallow me whole. Dana looked up slowly and said, "You sure it's just one guy?" I couldn't speak, not because I was in denial, but because something inside me had already suspected it. But now it had a shape, a number, too. That night, I didn't go home. I drove to a motel off the highway, stared at the peeling wallpaper, and realized I was married to someone who didn't just betray me. She replaced me with more than one option. Like I was a coat she took off whenever the weather changed. And the worst part, she probably still thought I didn't know. I went back home the next morning before she could question my absence. I walked through the front door with a paper coffee cup in hand and a casual morning, like I hadn't just learned she'd been booking romantic weekends with not one but two different men. She blinked, surprised, like she hadn't expected me to return so early or at all. "Everything okay?" she asked, her voice carefully neutral, like she was trying not to trigger something. "Just couldn't sleep," I said. "Went for a drive, stayed at a motel, needed space to clear my head." She nodded too quickly. "Oh well, I figured maybe work had you late." I smiled like I believed her. I was getting good at pretending. That afternoon, I left work early. I parked 3 blocks from the yoga studio. She said she attended every Thursday at 6 call. I waited, watched, not in a stalker way, in a husband who's been lied to and gaslit so often, he started doubting his own shadow kind of way. She never went inside. Instead, she strolled right past the studio in her yoga leggings and oversized hoodie, pretending she had a mat under her arm, and climbed into the passenger seat of a grey Audi SUV. I didn't recognize the driver. He leaned over, kissed her. I swear I actually blinked like it would make the scene disappear. They drove off. I followed slowly from a distance, careful not to get too close. My hands were sweating, my throat dry. This wasn't a movie. This was real. And I was the idiot who used to think loyalty meant something to her. They ended up at a little wine bar downtown, one of those dimly lit places with candles and mason jars and a wine list that reads like a novel. I parked across the street, got out, and stood far enough not to be seen, but close enough to watch. She looked happy, like genuinely happy, the way she used to look after our wedding when we snuck into that fancy rooftop restaurant because we couldn't afford it, but wanted to pretend. She never looked at me like that anymore. I took out my phone, snapped a few photos, not to post, not to send, just to remember, to remind myself I wasn't crazy, that the betrayal wasn't in my head. An hour later, they left. He had his hand on her lower back like he owned her. She didn't stop him. They drove off again, and I didn't follow this time. I had enough. I sat in my car in the dark, staring at the photos. I wasn't even angry anymore. I was hollow. Breda hadn't just broken her vows. She'd rehearsed the betrayal so well it had become her second language. When I got home that night, she was already there, showered, fresh hair, same hoodie. She greeted me with a smile and said, "Hope you had a good night." I nodded. She kissed me on the cheek, and that was the exact moment I knew I couldn't stay here much longer. Breda had a pattern. Mondays and Wednesdays were late meetings. Thursdays she was at yoga. Saturdays she slept in while I went to run errands and grab groceries, and every single one of those convenient little time slots, I used them to dismantle my life with her piece by piece. I didn't pack my bags. That's what amateurs do. I packed my identity. I started with the joint accounts. I met with a financial advisor under the guise of early retirement planning. But what I really asked was, how do I legally move my direct deposit and savings without tipping her off? He gave me the playbook. I followed it exactly. Next was the insurance policies. Breda had me listed as the co-beneficiary on her private health and life policies. I wasn't about to go down in some accidental scandal where I mysteriously fell off a hiking trail with no foul play suspected. I called the agency and removed myself. She was in the same house while I did it. Upstairs, blasting music while working on a design brief. I was downstairs, erasing my name from every future she had planned without me. Every time I handed her a cup of tea or rubbed her back while she faked a stress headache, I wanted to scream. "You have no idea, do you? You think I'm still in this fog. You think I'm begging you to stay, but I'm building the runway for takeoff, not rescue." One night, she came home later than usual, her makeup smeared just enough to look like she had cried or laughed too hard. I said nothing, but I saw the lipstick on her collar. It wasn't hers. That same night, I took the hard drive from our shared office and cloned it. You'd be amazed what people leave unencrypted when they think their spouse is too boring to check. Messages, photos, a shared calendar between her and Wesley. Events color-coded like some sick version of a wedding planner. Wine bar, getaway prep. W's B-Day surprise. I wasn't even mad anymore. I was studying her like an opponent, calculating. The last thing I did that week was transfer all of my documents, my birth certificate, passport, business files, and anything else personal into the climate-controlled unit I'd booked under a fake company name. It was hidden, secure, and invisible to her. I even put a blanket over the bin that held our wedding album. Not because I wanted it, but because I didn't trust her not to burn it out of guilt if she found it. The next morning, she kissed me before I left for work. "You've been quiet lately," she said. "Everything okay?" I smiled and said, "Better than ever." She walked back into the house with her phone already in her hand, texting God knows who. She didn't realize I'd already filed the first set of divorce papers. I didn't tell my family. I didn't tell our mutual friends. I didn't even tell my co-workers, even though they saw the bags under my eyes and the hesitation in my voice every time I answered, "How's everything at home?" But there was one person I couldn't keep this from any longer. My mother. Now, before you roll your eyes, no, she's not one of those overbearing mums who hated Breda from day one. In fact, she liked her too much. She defended her when I complained. She called her my other daughter. She made me promise to hold on to Breda during hard times. So I drove 3 hours to her place without warning. I just showed up on her porch like I was 12 again, holding back tears after losing a spelling bee. She opened the door, saw my face, and said, "Oh no, who died?" And I said, "Only the version of me who thought my wife loved me." We sat in her living room. She poured me tea even though I didn't ask for it. I told her everything, the emails, the fake yoga, the men, the photos, the lies. I didn't spare details because sugarcoating felt like protecting Breda, and I was done doing that. My mum sat in silence, her face pale. She kept shaking her head like each word was a hammer against her trust in everything she thought she knew about our marriage. And then she said something I didn't expect. "You know," she whispered, "I always thought she looked at you like you were a safety net, not a partner." That hit me harder than anything Breda had done. I asked her why she never said anything. She just sighed. "Because you were happy where you thought you were. And sometimes parents don't interfere until the cracks show." She walked to her closet, pulled out a dusty shoebox and handed it to me. Inside were letters from me from college, from the early years of our marriage. Even receipts from our honeymoon that I'd thrown away, and she somehow saved. "You used to write about her like she was a miracle," she said. "I don't think you realized you stopped." That night, I stayed in my old room. The posters were gone, the mattress was newer, but the ceiling still had that one water-stained shape like Florida. I stared at it and thought about how long I'd been trying to fix a version of Breda that didn't exist anymore. Maybe never did. In the morning, my mum made pancakes. I barely touched them. Before I left, she handed me a check. 5 grand, just in case. I told her I didn't need it. She said, "Take it anyway. Start over. Burn the memories if you have to." Driving back, I didn't cry, but I did feel something I hadn't felt in months. Peace. Breda didn't call, didn't text. I'm sure she thought I was still playing house, still too cowardly to walk. The house was quiet. Not peaceful, too quiet, like the pause before something heavy crashes. Breda was in the kitchen pouring wine, acting like we weren't living on opposite sides of a glass wall. She wore that same smug calm I'd come to recognize. The kind of calm people wear when they believe they've won before the game's even over. She didn't ask where I'd been. I think part of her hoped I'd never ask where she'd been. I walked in holding a small white envelope. She didn't notice it at first. She asked if I wanted a glass. I said, "No, but you might need one." She froze halfway through pouring. "What's that supposed to mean?" she asked, not looking at me. I placed the envelope on the counter between us. "Read it." She slowly peeled it open, trying to stay composed, but I could see her hands tremble just slightly. Inside were 2 things: the initial divorce petition and a short typed letter. No drama, no insults, just this. "You always said men begged you to marry them. I never begged you to stay." That should have told you everything. She didn't say a word. She just stared at the page, then at me, then back down again. The silence stretched so long I could hear the clock ticking above the stove. Finally, she asked, "So that's it? After everything?" I nodded. "You don't even want to fight for this?" I smiled. "You stopped fighting years ago. I just finally caught up." For the first time in months, she looked small. Not cruel, not angry, just small, like the illusion had cracked. And she realized she wasn't the one holding the leash anymore. I didn't wait for her to respond. I turned, walked out of the kitchen, took the bag I'd packed weeks ago from the hallway closet, the one she never thought to check, and stepped outside into air that suddenly felt like oxygen. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't scroll through old pictures. I didn't reread texts or ask myself what if. I sat in that tiny apartment I'd rented, ate cold pizza, and watched dumb TV like a man who had nothing left to lose and had finally stopped clinging to the person who took everything for granted. Starting over isn't glamorous. It's quiet, but it's mine. And for once, so am I.